So this is just after 9 a.m. 0904. About 0904 is the time given on the banner that is running now. Thursday, the 11th of March 2021, and this is part 2 or part B of the KhoodeelaarTV channel being broadcast only online on the internet, not on satellite or on terrestrial platforms. And this Khoodeelaar campaign, KhoodeelaarTV channel, is being broadcast as part of the ongoing campaigns, analysis, and educational programs that are contained in the movement defending the community in the East End of London and defending the community from the East End of London. And the movement defending the community in the East End of London was founded on the 13th of June, 1963. That was 2 years plus before the formation of the London Borough of Tower Hamlets Council and the other 31 boroughs or 30 boroughs in London that make up the boroughs in what is known as Greater London. And there is a Greater London Assembly. Greater London Assembly is a kind of continuation of what until 1986 used to be called the Greater London Council, or GLC. And the GLC, the Greater London Assembly, which is what the current regional assembly in the name of London is called. And all of these occur in our broadcast, in our posts, and our commentaries and diagnoses. Everything we broadcast or publish or post, except any links or any cited item, is our original work. So obviously, by definition and self-evidently, the cited items are automatically shown to be the work of other sources and platforms. But where that is not obvious, we make it clear by saying, for example, image taken from the Times newspaper, say, or the Guardian or something. But otherwise, everything we say, we broadcast, is to be treated as our original work, originally created, originally researched, edited, and broadcast. Anyone who wants to know about the background, there is no glamorous kind of pictures or kind of paintings or illustrations or anything behind me, is simply a technical factor. And also editorially, we are more interested in getting stuff done. And there is a lot of work, intellectual work, research, fact-checking, and all the rest of it that takes up most of the time. And the daily kind of sources that we actually produce are very limited in terms of the Fleet Street papers. So those who we don't necessarily mention, but are in the background of our work, include the other publications and contextually publications from and in other countries and at other times. Now today's first part A, was 13 minutes long, and it had the main discussion about or references to the London Borough of Newham Council and my appearance against the then corrupt mayor post holder, Robin Wales, from the London Borough of Newham, on a satellite channel that is now defunct. And it was broadcast on 14th of March 2018, 2 days after the same channel broadcast a similar length of an item featuring Roxana Fias and one of her code promoters. And we have referred to that before, but we shall be referring to both of those broadcasts in due course, for the simple reason that the individuals, as well as the actual behavior of the council and the conduct of the council and conduct of the persons, are in need of being kind of referred to anew, afresh, in view of their behavior and in view of the actual action or lack of action under the duties that the local council, Niwam Council, owes to the people in various parts of the borough with various needs that are all legally defined. Now, this is the item on yesterday's Guardian that we discussed in Part A. And this is the one that says, let's make it as close as possible and as legible and as readable. It says that true scale of the cash crisis facing councils. Now, this is dated Wednesday, the 10th of March, 2021. And this one is by Patrick Butler, who is described there as social policy editor. And it's the kind of main substance is claimed to be based on the National Audit Office. And we said that the National Audit Office is quoted as saying, or not quoted as, is stated as saying, that 94% of English councils, that is, councils based in the England part of the UK, expect to cut spending next year to meet legal duties to balance budgets amid the coronavirus pandemic. Now, there is coronavirus pandemic, there is balancing the budget, there is legal duties, and there is cuts. So there are four aspects to the whole thing. And as anyone familiar with our analysis of the Fleet Street papers and our particular analysis and identification of the Guardian, should be able to find enough references by us to the Guardian as a corrupt newspaper disguised as a so-called liberal type of newspaper, but it's actually corrupt and it has got a problem with identity. In that its main kind of claim is that it's not the Daily Mail, but it actually apes the Daily Mail's agenda more furiously and more frequently than it actually otherwise admits. And it's a right-wing kind of operation, as exposed during the campaign over 5 years of Corbyn. The Guardian attacked Corbyn throughout. And that attack was exactly the same kind of attacks that the Daily Mail and the Scum and the others, Daily Express, etc., carried out against Corbyn. And what is happening in this article? This article is completely ignorant. And this person, Patrick Butler, is an idiot. We have seen his pieces, and he's an idiot. He has got more of the kind of publications or titles that he is given bylines to or for are in denial. And this one, the true scale of the cash crisis facing councils, starts with the kind of attack on the services that the council is duty bound to deliver, and is being excused by citing the so-called National Audit Office kind of excuse that cuts are responsible for the failure of the councils or the diversion by the councils of the funds to various kind of dubious headings by denying the main services, etc. Now, let's take the case of Newham in the relevant detail. Our campaign has direct, exclusive evidence that in the last fortnight, Newham Council has been wasting employees' time and causing serious losses and damages to at least one member of the community in Newham. And that in the course of the last fortnight, let's say, Newham Council has caused literally dozens of communications to be made to various parts of the Newham Council. And Newham Council's parts have all collectively have failed to provide the answers. And now this is about something that doesn't exist, the kind of excuse that they've created for wasting so much time, council time, as well as the time of the particular person or personnel involved, is something that should not be there. It's a non-issue, non-matter. But by staying silent about their initial communication, Newham Council is adding to the distress and the anxiety that they are imposing on a person under the banner of their delivering some service. Now, obviously, for data protection reasons, in this program, we are not naming the person affected or personnel affected, but this is an illustration of the total waste done by Newham Council. So this is, if all the costs that have been incurred and all the losses that have been suffered so far in the fortnight, if they are added up and the costs are rated, if you like, at the rate of, or calculated at the rate of David Panic, let's say, David Panic charging Manchester City Football Club £20,000 per day for his advice, or he's acting in the name of the Manchester City Football Club. If it is £20,000 for an ordinary day, that is to say 7 hours or 7 to 8 hours, let's say, to stretch it up to 8 hours, then multiply 20,000 by the number of days that Newham Council has caused to be devoted to pursuing it over various questions that it owes answers to and hasn't been answering. So how many days is it? Let's say, starting from the actual, so if we start, say, so 22nd of February. So that is 6 days of February, yeah? And you add 6 days to 11 days. So it's more than a fortnight, 17 days. And it's not just confined to work weekdays. 17 days in total. And 17 days, if you say multiply 70 days by 20,000, how much is it? So it's, for 10 days it's £200,000, and add another 140. So 214,000 pounds, £250,000 at debit Pennick's rate, but the rate could go up and include other specialists and specialized experts and people and organizations. So it could be like anything between £214,000 to 200,000, £214,000 to £2 million because of the rate at which those expertise or experts can be kind of repaid for their time and their expertise, any range of knowledge and skills. That is what has been involved in here. And we are not giving the further names because of data protection reasons. But the essential lesson is that the Guardian is wrong. The Guardian is wrong, Patrick Butler is wrong, and the National Audit Office is wrong. And we shall, as I said in part A, we shall come back to a detailed examination of the National Audit Office's ignorance. Now, having said all of that about National Audit Office and the Guardian and Newham Council, let's say that the picture of the level of competence and level of accountability that comes across in the news today, which is the first time that they have returned to earth, and how horrible the subject is and the events are. This is the kind of reality check in terms of the entire Fleet Street having taken a flight away from reality to serve the cause of the racist royal family and Buckingham Palace for the entirety of the last 10 days, let's say. And they've come back with this news of this 33-year-old woman who is now reported to have been definitely found to have been murdered. And the criminal who has been arrested on suspicion of murdering her and committing other crimes, amazingly, wait for it, is a member of the diplomatic corps of the Metropolitan Police, who has also been assigned to do guard duties around nuclear weapons sites or site. You cannot make it more dangerous and more uncertain and more chilling. And according to one woman who has tweeted today, who says that she lives 5 minutes from the scene in Clapham, where this tragic woman was kidnapped or accosted first. The Sarah Everard, she went missing last week while walking home in South London, that is Clapham Common, which is in Wandsworth. And the police and the Times is making a pointed headline. It's not all for police PR. It's the first line actually shows that the Times headline writer at least was not convinced that the police assurance should be accepted. It says, police insist women safe as remains discovered. It says that the women generally are safe because they're not exposed to risk and danger of being accosted or kidnapped or murdered, despite the fact that remains that are suspected to be very much those of Sarah Everard are discovered. And then the smaller heading says, officer held over suspected murder of executive. Now let's read this one a bit more. This is by three of them. Fiona Hamilton, crime editor, well, four of them. Fiona Hamilton, crime editor of the Times, and the John Simpson, David Brown, and Fariha Karim. Dame Cressida Dick, Britain's most senior police officer, tried last night to reassure women they were safe walking the streets after one of her officers was arrested on suspicion of murdering the marketing manager Sarah Everard. That's a contradictory item of news or assertion. And what I am pointing to with this one is that, like Boris Johnson, who is a fronter of the cabal that is dysfunctioning and dishonest, of course, he's personally dishonest, as is every single member of his cabinet currently on display is. The central government in the UK is fronted by a dishonest person or a dishonest cabal, incompetent, dysfunctioning, and dishonest. Now, in addition to that, there are kind of racism, because in the last 48 hours, Johnson has craftily kind of sidled up in terms of a narrative very near Brenda, that is also known as Queen Elizabeth II. He has done that by saying that he has the most respect and admiration for Brenda, but he doesn't, because as the facts show, during the months before the 2019 so-called election, Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg lied to Brenda as the constitutional monarch while she was staying in her castle in Scotland. And they lied according to all the accounts. And therefore they misled her. And so therefore that showed that he doesn't have any respect for Brenda. So that's a lie. So those newspapers in Fleet Street who have been retailing that kind of statement of loyalty and admiration by Boris Johnson for the monarch are lying for him. Now that is one thing. And the other thing is that Boris Johnson also craftily issued a statement praising the Fleet Street papers. That was not an accident. That was not some kind of result of recklessness and sudden kind of scattergun focusing on things that might kind of stick. As Sputnik has said, attributing a quote or a statement by Muhammad Akhunji. Akhunji being the licensed law trader who has been seen in the public kind of domain in the name of Shamima Begum or her family. So we'll go back to Boris Johnson and expose his lie, his racist lie. And how does he craftily cover up that lie? He issues a statement within hours of it being confirmed that the interview with Oprah Winfrey given by Meghan Markle and Harry contained references to very serious racist discrimination, bullying, and harassment against Meghan. And what Boris Johnson does, he's not mentioned, he's not anywhere near anything to do with the interview. And yet he suddenly appears as if holding on to the tail of Brenda, also known as Queen Elizabeth II, and saying that no, there was no racism. Because what Meghan and Harry have been subjected to over the last 2 years is a persistent, poisonous, racistly motivated, racistly conducted campaign of harassment to hound Meghan Markle out of the UK and out of the royal family, to separate them, to have them ditched by the others in the royal family, and to have them kind of made so discredited that they would have no legitimate sense of security or safety or being at home or feeling at home in the UK. That is the truth. And what Boris Johnson has done, instead of saying that, oh, no, no, there was no racism, he says that he defends the press and he thinks that the press is not racist. Now, that is blatantly wrong and untrue and untruthful. And that itself is racist. The timing and the actual fact of his even daring to issue that denial is itself racist. Now, that is bad. But the bad is made worse, even worse, by the various subsidiary liars that have now cottoned on and are now kind of hanging on to the kind of narrative that is designed to salvage designed to salvage the image of the so-called royal family that is fronted by Brenda, also known as Elizabeth II. And here is a white man. And not only is he a white man, he is also notorious as a self-confessed former member of the Communist Party of Britain, who has now become a paid kind of slave, mental slave, serving as an agent for the right wing, very anti-communist right wing, Rupert Murdoch as a columnist in the Times or as a commentator in the Times. And the headline to his piece today, Times, page 25, the Times of Thursday, the 11th of March, 2021. The headline says, there is no hard evidence of royal racism. There is no such thing as royal racism, and there is no such thing as hard evidence. What there is continuous, constant, undeniable evidence, as experienced by the victims of racism, that racism rules everything in Britain. And nobody would say that there is a particular brand of racism that can be called royal racism. It's not. It's racism, full stop. So let's look at Aranovich defending the racists in the royal family, or the racists, let's say, full stop. I'm not a great one for duchesses. Who gives a what, whether he is or not? As Robbie Burns wrote of deference to lords. Now, Robbie Burns was not a black person. And Robbie Burns could not be cited as anything to do with what is racism and what is not, because he was a white man. As Robbie Burns wrote of deference to lords, his riband, star, and all that, the man of independent mind, he looks and laughs at all of that. And when that man wants genuine, real-life family drama, he listens to the Archers. Nor am I persuaded that this latest demarche is some great existential crisis for the royal family, reckoning that if you can survive Prince Andrew, you can survive anything. Now, all of that is completely irrelevant. And all of that is completely untrue. Because racism has nothing to do with the House of Peers and the corruption in making people House of Peers members. Racism is all over the place, and racism is the main driving force behind most of the decisions about society and individually, and racism is the dominant factor. And as I have been saying, racism also is the Brexit. I mean, I don't need to repeat the things because they can be checked on the record of what I've already said on the video and the broadcasts, and also have been publishing for a very long time. Now, he then says, talks about his family, grandfather. So he says about his maternal grandfather, an army officer whom I only met once. He said he met David Aranovich, had a derogatory word for just about every nationality and color other than his own, all of which he deployed with an imperial sense of national and racial superiority. He is admitting his own grandfather. This included describing my father, that is, the man described his own son, as a hairy Jewish gorilla. That was some time ago now, but maybe some of that survives at rarefied heights. Or perhaps instead we could speculate that the original comment came from someone actually hoping for a child who was noticeably darker on the basis of it demonstrating in the princely flesh the royals' investment in diversity. My own mother, as militant and anti racist as you can imagine, might easily have said something like that. And after all, what on earth would be the point of expressing concern about the color of a baby who will be born in any case? But just as one side makes the assumption that this accusation is dynamite, suggesting an institution in desperate need of re education, the other asserts that it is all a lie concocted to wound our hard-working, dutiful royals. It needs re-stressing. The only fact here is that we don't know. Yet so many people act and write as if they do. And if that is the point, I want to link the royal race imbroglio to another scandal, this time on the other side of the Atlantic. Early in the pandemic, I started to listen to podcasts and read articles by the veteran New York Times science reporter Donald McNeil, one of those craggy old journalists who quite enjoys their own cragginess. McNeil turned out to be a brilliant guide to the uncertainties of the corona world. With excellent contacts and superb judgment, he called it right. From his early pessimism about viral spread to his early optimism about vaccine development, he seemed nailed on for a Pulitzer. Then last month, out of the blue, came the story that he had, in effect, been fired. The full story, including his own lengthy version, has now been published, and it begins in 2019 when he was one of the journalists accompanying paying teenagers on a New York Times jaunt to Peru. Some of them had complained about him. That complaint had leaked to a rival news outfit who wrote up the story, and the sky fell on McNeil's grizzled head. McNeil himself has detailed the complaints, all of which seem to allege some form of racial insensitivity, and which range from the use of the N word to dissing the medicinal capabilities of a Peruvian shaman. No one disputes that he had used the N word in a discussion about racism, because a friend of one of the participants had got into terrible trouble for using it herself. When it was demanded of him by his management that he apologize, he did so, writing that originally I thought the context in which I used this ugly word could be defended. I now realize that it cannot. It is deeply offensive and hurtful. Not enough. The balloon went up among some of his colleagues, over 150 of whom dismissed the management defense that McNeil had no racist intention. Intention, they wrote, is irrelevant. They were outraged and in pain, they said, because we have given a prominent platform a critical beat covering a pandemic disproportionately affecting people of color, to someone who chose to use language that is offensive and unacceptable by any newsroom standards. Now, the whole piece, this racist is writing in effect a defense of another racist. And the headline is that the royal family are not racist. Look at that. Think about this. The whole piece is mainly dedicated to a defense of a racist in America. And he's now saying, he's calling it, the royal family is not racist. What does he know? He is of Russian Jewish origin. So he's not black. And he's not a victim of racism, nor has any of his family been a victim of racism. And yet, he is writing in the Times that the royal family is not racist. What does he know? That is racist. The fact that he is even allowed that heading and that piece is itself an act of racism. By the Times, and they are looking all over the place for all kinds of excuses to justify the racism of the Palace and of the rest of the family of Brandas. Now, we shall come to that and the other papers today about the racism suffered by Meghan. But David Aaronovitch is completely in the dark ages, trying to look for any kind of excuse, looking as dark and as deep as he can get to deny the racism of the Buckingham Palace that Harry and Meghan have been subjected to. Meghan because of herself being black and half white, and Harry because of marrying her. That is what the main problem was about, because Wills had said at the prompting of Kate Middleton that Harry shouldn't marry or get close to Meghan Markle early on. And that was the beginning of the racist origin of the problem that the royal family has allowed to come to this stage by its own racism and racist denial. Now, the Fleet Street paper, what is the one that is the other one that I've already looked at today and seen? Because apart from David Aaronovitch in the Times, so-called, there is a tabloid paper in which, the Daily Mail also has got a similar white man denying that the royals were racist or could be even racist. Yes, that's Glover, Stephen Glover in the Daily Mail. And so therefore, these are names on the kind of newspaper staff or listed columnists and writers. So therefore, they are quite, in terms of the papers themselves, so the titles themselves are comparatively known and therefore high profile. Now, on the top end of the Daily Mail today, the main bottom is given to the victim of this murder, this tragic Sarah Everard. But the top 2/5 of the paper on the front page, the Daily Mail, is given to two lines, two kind of sentences. The first one is the Queen peace talks with Harry. And the second one is Piers Morgan quit after Meghan complained. Now, that is what it looks like. That is what it looks like about the Queen peace talks. All right. Now, if the Queen is now reportedly having peace talks with Harry, then it is again another vindication of what we have been saying, that Fleet Street saying that Brenda, that is the Queen, would not even watch that program was a very calm and chillingly kind of intended lie, and a racist lie at that. Because Immediately after the coverage by press and the rest of the media of the contents of the interview, Brenda was reported to have already backtracked and began to kind of reluctantly, but on the facts, in fact, on the facts, admit that there were concerning issues. And as we discussed yesterday, she said that allegation of racism is concerning, but that she will deal with those in private. That is the contradiction I discussed at length yesterday. But today, the Queen Peace Talks with Harry is even another, in terms of propaganda in public, another hallmark, milestone towards the truth and against the racist Fleet Street and the racist royal family. Because as I said yesterday, and as other people must have said similar things, not necessarily the same things exactly as I said, but similar things, that far from the royal family being the kind of at the moral high ground, this whole mention of the fact that Meghan was hounded and harassed by racists variously was going to destroy the royal family's integrity and image. And I have said, and if I haven't said exactly these words, let me say these words. I have meant to say this, that whatever they actually did to cover up the truth about the murder of Diana, and even the confession by Brenda that she had had a horrible year, annus horribilis, she described 1997 to be. Whatever she did and whatever her courtiers and others did, they did on the assumption that the royal family as a brand would survive the chilly, cruel, harassing behavior they had shown towards Diana. Now that is, in the world context today, that is peanuts in terms of the challenge and in terms of the problems faced by the family of Brendas following the murder of Diana and Dodi Fayed. Because the Oprah Winfrey interview, according to one study, has been seen, one viewing data has been seen by more than 50 million people worldwide. Now 50 million people is nearer the total population of the UK. And 50 million is a lot of people watching a television program because of the internet and other kind of alternatives to the television format. Viewing figures like 50 million for one particular episode or one particular event is quite high. Looking at the viewing figures for some of the most kind of promoted and kind of quote popular series or plays, 50 million by any standard is very, very significant number of people watching, number one. Number two is that in Asia and Africa, where all the so-called former Commonwealth countries, that is to say, the British Empire countries are based, the royal family is treated as a kind of template on many things, and as a standard bearer, as a kind of barometer. But the significant thing is that if those majority of the people who do view or have had such view about the royal family so far, they would be the most horrified by this claim that royal family has been racistly hounding this black woman. And the royal family's status would like drop from 100, let's say, on a scale of 100, it would drop like -3 or something. That is how bad it has been. But the likes of Stephen Glover and the stupid racist David Aronovich are incapable intellectually to come to any conclusion that shows that they are racist or that the world is not prepared to put up with racism in the way that they think they have been used to. So that is going to be the second factor. The other factor is that in the USA, despite the fact that the police are regularly shooting dead black men and continuing to behave in racist ways against black people, because of the population, because of the actual direct history of slavery, and because of the various unavoidable and necessary actions against racism that are being kind of built across the USA, and Oprah Winfrey being treated as a very significant part of those anti-racist institutional and other kind of activities and behavior. The fact that she has given publicity to this claim on her program, on her show, which is the most, in terms of marketing, in terms of rating, the most highly rated program or outlet or show in the USA, that is nothing compared to murmurs that Muhammad Al-Fayed uttered by accusing the royal family of murdering Diana and his son Dodi Fayed. So the response today, as shown in even the Daily Mail, which has been found guilty of anti-Meghan racist kind of intrusions and abuses, and has been ordered to publish its apology, the Mail group, that is Mail on Sunday, shows that despite the fact that they are in denial, like Stephen Glover and in the Times, the David Aronovich piece show, they are on retreat and they are absolutely not going to recover from this one. They have to stop being so racist. That's the point I make. This may not be the same thing as racism being ended, let me hasten to say. And the Daily Mail apart, this Daily Mirror is the only one that is running kind of a front page without referring to the interview of the royal family of racism. And they're, of course, correctly focusing on something overdue, that is the dishonesty and corruption and abuse of the COVID-19 funds, that is millions, billions of pounds of COVID-19 funds are being siphoned off to cons and conservative donors and others. And the Daily Mirror is saying that 37 billion test and trace system, that doesn't work. I mean, it doesn't need explaining. That is the test and trace, and it's a project that Boris Johnson handed to his friend and Cameron's friend, and a conservative kind of proven failure, Dito Harding, wife of a conservative MP and former minister. Former minister that I had kind of tried to extract answers to questions from when he was local government minister And I was presenting a program, the Khoodeelaar campaign program I presented in 2016 for about 5 weeks on a satellite channel that is now defunct. And I had asked questions about the 2 commissioners that Eric Pickles had appointed, and the commissioners' end of tenure in 2016. And I found that I was communicating to a number of serial dead people in the communities and local government department. Now, this phrase, dead people, applies to all the local councils, applies to all the central government departments, applies to all the parliamentary committees and so on. Anyone watching this and wondering what on earth is this program about needs to be reminded what this is about. This is original, world exclusive investigation into Fleet Street. Now, Fleet Street is not just about, the investigation is not just about the contents of Fleet Street newspapers, but their origins, the sources, the links, and the narratives and the agenda that they represent, which takes us into the workings or lack of working of the government departments, of elected MPs and elected councillors and parliament and everything else, and including the behavior of the corrupt bureaucracy called the judiciary and the institutions like the University of Oxford and Cambridge. And so this is the original place where all the investigative findings are compressed into a talk or a lecture that, depending on the time and the other factors around the thing that you cannot see, lasts either 30 minutes or 10 minutes or lasts up to 2 hours and 22 minutes, which happened in the last program yesterday, I think, or the first program. The first program, I think, yesterday, there was broadcast shortly after 10 o'clock. And it had about 15,000 words in my speech. So what I broadcast every week, if put together in a written form, in a kind of text form, it would be like every week I'm publishing on this channel a full-length book. And this is original and investigative and world exclusive, because no one else is doing anything like this. They will not be able to do anything like this. And I have yet to see or hear any evidence that anyone else is doing anything like this. Because I'm a journalist maintaining the highest standard of journalism. I'm an investigator, I'm a constitutional law activist and campaigner, I'm a demographer, I'm an economist, I'm a social scientist and a campaigns organizer, and I'm a poet and a translator, and I'm a particular translator of the rebel poet Qazi Nazrul Islam. And I am, in the context of all of this, as it said on the first banner, top banner, I am the 4th generation male descendant of the spiritual leader, philanthropist, educationist, and world traveler. I didn't put the world because there is a limit to the number of words that you can put on the banner. So world traveler, Bed Shah, or Shah Abdul Ali, who lived mainly in the 19th century. He was born sometime in the 1800 something. And whatever the number of years he lived for, I haven't got the actual details in front of me. What I'm saying there is based on the very short kind of summary that I can make available. I shall be publishing, of course, an up-to-date account, or the account, on the Bed Shah and why I do what I do and what I've been doing. Because my grandmother, who told me first about Bed Shah, said that I was very much like him. I did things and my mood and outlook was very much like him. And I didn't see him, so I didn't kind of personally witness anything that he did. But my feelings and my outlook are like him. And what I've been doing is very much like him, because he refused. He refused offers of material wealth and land that would make him many times more kind of wealthy ones. Over the years, many years, he was offered literally thousands and thousands of acres of land, and he said no. So I have been doing the same thing, not in terms of refusing offers of land, but I've been refusing offers that are equivalent in terms of principle. And the reason why I fight for justice is because that is literally in the blood, in the DNA. And when the Guardian ran a kind of stupid, typically stupid Guardian piece, calling me the Messiah. I mean, the film that has been released now in the USA about the Black Panthers, that film actually refers to, or kind of in context refers to, the FBI's notorious Edgar Hoover, who was demonizing or being scared of the Black Messiah. Now, I haven't been called the Black Messiah, but I've been called the angry Messiah of E1, which is the nearest that I could be kind of called. And in the introduction, the Guardian describes me as being like the hero or a hero of R.K. Narayan, the South Indian writer and noted kind of celebrated writer. And then the Guardian piece degenerates, as it must do, because they cannot put up with somebody whose image is like that at the beginning, because that would actually show them off, show them up, not off. And there is an unfinished business about the Guardian lying and running that stupid piece, because if I was a Messiah, which I never claimed to be a Messiah, but that is what the Guardian chose to say, of E1. And they were talking about me not working against injustice and campaigning. Essentially, in the E1 at the time, I was campaigning in Niwam against the racist head teacher at the school that was called the Stratford School, not far from the Stratford School. And it had a complex kind of composition, because although it was in Newham, it was one of those conservative creations in terms of governance. It was a grant-maintained school, and the grant-maintained school was opposed by the Newham local council, which is and was controlled by the Labour Party. And my involvement began or was triggered by the appearance in the London Evening Standard of a piece by Shekhar Bhatia, or one of the Bhatias, who was employed either as a freelancer or as a kind of staff writer, who completely messed up the actual context and the narrative and distorted the facts about the Stratford School, because at that time, that is January 1992, the parents that were embattled against the head teacher, Anne Snelling, at that time, were demanding the right to be treated as governors, which Anne Snelling refused to do because of her racism, because the majority of the governors were not white, because of the children were not white. So they were representative. The parents were representative of the kind of demography of the school, the population of the school. So Shekhar Bhatia spoke to the chair of the governors at that time, a man, I think, from northwest Pakistan, called Ghulam Rasul Shaida. Now, Ghulam Rasul Shaida claimed to me that he had a master's degree from a university in Pakistan before he came to the UK. If that is the case, then that might be the case. But the way he treated the English language and the way he approached many expressions suggested that he needed kind of a long and proper kind of introduction to using the language, English language, ordinarily. So that might have been one reason why Shekhar Bhatia, or whatever Bhatia that was able to exploit his Ghulam Rasul Shahida's kind of command of the English language, or limited command of the English language, or Ghulam Rasul Shahida's inability to understand some of the colloquial kind of expressions which Shekhar Bhatia might have used, I don't know. But looking at the text of what Shekhar Bhatia published about Ghulam Rasul Shahida, immediately alarm bells rang. And I thought that here was a group of parents, school governors, Asian ones mainly, Muslim, of course, mainly, that are being discredited even before they have started. Say, they were being discredited because Shekhar Bhatia had written, whether it is factually true or not, he had written that Mr. Shahida was similar to the Bradford Muslims who had burned Satan Rushdie's book in Bradford, and that Mr. Shahida was inspired by hatred of Salman Rushdie, or he hated Salman Rushdie. The dispute at the Stratford School was nothing, absolutely nothing to do with either for or against Satan Rushdie or against Muslim kind of community. It was a mixed faith kind of background, but Mr. Shahida was a Muslim and he was obviously against what Satan Rushdie had said or done. But he wasn't involved in any campaign for or against Satan Rushdie in his capacity as the school governor or chair of the school governors at the Stratford School, ground maintained school. So I thought that there was a clear agenda to derail that campaign by the parent governors by blaming them wrongly or linking them wrongly with any campaign, anything to do with Satan Rushdie. Remember, the Satan Rushdie campaign against Satan Rushdie took place in late 1980s. So it was only a few years before the Stratford School campaign that I created by joining. And I'll tell you in a minute, in brief, how I created the campaign. So I contacted the Standard or whatever, and I actually issued a statement. I contacted Shahida or I contacted somebody, and I issued a statement in my capacity as the secretary of the London Collective of Black Governors, Black including African and Asian background people as well. And whatever I said was to, first of all, reject everything that the Evening Standard had said, and also go on to attack the wrong things that Anne Snelling had said and done. So then that was the moment when this campaign took root and it started to be reported in the mainstream, like by the newsroom southeast of the BBC on BBC One and ITV's London News Bulletin. And once everything I said had a reporter, started getting reported on these two television channels, the Fleet Street also began to follow suit. And it was the day, it was the time, it was the period, is the era of fax machines, not internet and not Twitter or a blog or website. it was still the era of fax machines. And I had communications, regular communications, almost on a daily basis for a number of weeks, which is a long time in a campaign that was getting such high profile in London, in the London television, mainly London television news outlets. I had regular daily contacts and communications with the following. Not initiated by me, but I had contacts. So therefore, it meant that I was receiving lots more kind of requests for interviews, whatever, than I was making requests to say something. And I had contacts from Alistair McCall, who was a reporter on the Daily Telegraph. And it was McCall's time. When McCall was doing that, Max Hastings was editing the Daily Telegraph, which is called, where he was called Max Hitler Hastings. And from the Times newspaper, I was getting calls and communications from a reporter who is no longer with the Times now, but he was similarly as frequent as Alistair McCall. And from the BBC newsroom, I was getting more approaches from Alison Jacks than anybody else. But these are things that happened about 29 years ago. And I'm not looking at any records, I'm just speaking from memory. The point is that Fleet Street and the BBC and the ITV have never been kind of staffed by well-informed, enlightened journalists. And all of them have been in denial of racism, and all of them have been on the side of the racists. And the number of times that I spoke to Alistair McCall and the others on the telephone would have been hundreds of times, which is a lot of work, which is a lot of times. And on every single component of the fact, everything I said was vindicated, has been vindicated, and will continue to be vindicated. So this is a significant engagement that I had over January, February, March, April, May. So 5 months. 5 months of engagement. And if, let's say, just to translate to the idea of the costs and damages and whatever, if the Newham Council, which has been causing a lot of waste of time and still not answering questions that are legitimate and absolutely based on the facts of their conduct, that is, I have said, worth in David Pennick's kind of terms or rates, £250,000 or whatever. And what I did at the Stratford School would be worth £1 billion if you look at all the ramifications and all the issues and all the details that have been examined and kind of diagnosed and brought up to date. Every aspect of so-called education, every aspect of so-called governorship and democracy and accountability, every aspect of migration, every aspect of imperialism, every aspect of brainwashing, and every aspect of discrimination, denial, and obstruction to access. Everything has had to be dealt with in order to rebut the accusation by the head teacher and Snelling and the Department for Education, so-called, where Kenneth Clarke was the Secretary of State. And it was, of course, John Major's government. And Kenneth Clarke issued stupidity after stupidity and idiocy after racist idiocy, none of which stuck. And everything I said, both to the television people as well as to Fleet Street, has been vindicated. And this is 29 years ago. And I shall come to the behavior of the midget Ian Pissoff. And it is then at that time that I called him Ian Pissoff, because he published a series of lies in a number of private eye issues about the school. Everything they published about what I was doing was lies. And I shall continue to challenge those lies and update on those lies. And what Meghan Markle has been subjected to, 100% accurate. What she has been saying, 100% accurate. She was not going to be tolerated by the racist status quo. No way. Not inside the palace and not by and among the servile Fleet Street, racist Fleet Street. They will never accept her. And it's not a matter of convincing somebody about the correctness of your side or your argument. It's a war. It's a racist war that racists have waged for hundreds of years. And that is going on for hundreds of years. So when the Daily Express publishes a headline giving credit to the BBC, now remember the BBC has been at the receiving end of attacks by the Daily Express for decades. Attacks by the Daily Mail, attacks by the Sun, Scum. And yet these papers have given credit to the BBC because Nick Campbell, who is a racist, was told off by an African origin woman who said that Shamima Begum got a negative ruling against her by the Supreme Court because, as this woman said, she was brown. Of course, she was Muslim and she was an Asian and she was treated with hostility by the Supreme Court. That is the fact. Daily Express doesn't know what is right and what is wrong. The BBC people don't know. Nick Campbell doesn't know what is right or wrong. He doesn't know what goes on in the judicial bureaucracy. Nor do the people who write the piece in Wales or in the Sputnik or in the Oxford Mail or whatever, posing as some kind of neutral, informed observers of what the Supreme Court did. They don't know the law, and they never would know the law. Not to the extent that I do, and I have. And I know that the Supreme Court, that was a spectacle. That was a stupid, embarrassing exhibition of stupidity, racist stupidity and idiocy by this president, so-called the Reid. Because the 48-page ruling is full of, absolutely stuffed full of contradictions, even by their kind of standard. And that is the essence of the racist English jurisprudence. That is to say, all the reasonings that, you see the piles and piles of hardback books behind the so-called lawyers in their offices. These are full of absolute trash. Because the legal bureaucracies have been for the rich and for the powerful. They have not been objective, and they have not been delivering justice, and they have not been delivering fair access to justice, because they are not about justice. Okay. So the Daily Mirror makes a change today about talking about Boris Johnson and not about, again, Meghan Markle now. Now there is in the Mirror on page 6 a piece about this medical person. What is he called? The morons don't give his name at the beginning. That's breaking the rule of the basic reporting protocol that supposedly are taught in the journalism training school, so-called. Now, they've got how many? I mean, I'm diagnosing, so I'm giving the exact number of paragraphs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So in the main piece, they've got 9 paragraphs. And only on the 8th paragraph do they name the person this piece is about. They're saying that it's the chief medical officer, Professor Chris Whitty. They make you go to the 8th paragraph to know who they're talking about. Anyway, the Chris Whitty has been already reported saying the same thing before, or similar things about the foolishness of lifting the lockdown. And he's saying that the Kent variant of the virus is deadlier than older COVIDs, which is very important. But that shows up the stupidity of the journalism that the Daily Mirror does. And the Daily Mirror is we shall come to the Daily Mirror in a minute, but let's see what they're saying about this tragic person, Sarah Everard, who has been murdered. What can you say after a metropolitan policeman is arrested for murdering her? And the Daily Mirror is claiming that Ghislaine Maxwell's brother knows where the snap was taken and where was it taken. And the Daily Mirror is justifying backing Piers Morgan against Meghan Markle. And the piece is by Paul Routledge, who says that Piers Morgan is brutal in his outbursts, but his instincts are mainly sound. And the ITV has got other problems, other accusations against its. And this woman, black woman, the African woman in the Mirror, says to Piers Morgan that it was wrong to attack Meghan so harshly, Piers. Now, So we shall go back to Tower Hamlets Council and Newham Council, and we shall continue on the National Audit Office report about the claim in the Guardian yesterday that true scale of the cash crisis facing councils. Now that assumes that if the cash crisis wasn't there, the councils would be delivering their duties. That is total lies. That is untrue and untruthful. Let's recap on the things that councils do wrong, even when they have the money. Number one, the Home Office or the UK central government gave Tower Hamlets Council £2 million. Whatever the period, that is not relevant. And it will become clear in the next sentence. And Tower Hamlets Council's in-house employees in the then youth service, within quotation marks, stole £2 million and gave it to their friends or mates, or shared it among themselves outside of the council job. So that is a direct contradiction to the narrative that the Guardian item is based on or is promoting. The cash. Only because they have cash doesn't mean that councils use the cash for the right purpose or the right duty. And not only did they steal that £2 million, they stole other money. And they stole the other money by creating fake companies and fake identities for fake companies or fame projects, let's say, in Tower Hamlets. Notice that. So when you read this, or when you hear about councils failing to do their job because they haven't got enough central government funding, think about what Tower Hamlets Council's in-house, that is employed as council staff in the youth disservice. Disservice is my word, not their word. Disservice is based on the disservice that they did instead of service. Then Tower Hamlets Council had the other budgets over the period 2010, October 2010, when Lutfur Rahman was foisted as the first incumbent, that is, the first occupant in the post of the corrupting post of elected mayor in October 2010. And 2010 was the year, the calendar year, when these children would have been 10 years old, these Shamima Begum and the other two girls with her, and whatever the age of the other fourth girl who went to Syria in 2014, maybe a year older or younger. That remains subject to be checked. Essentially, these children were 10 years old. And during the 6 calendar years that followed the October 2010, beginning of the corrupt mayor regime, sometime during those 6 calendar years, did these 3 girls undergo whatever process, whatever contracts, whatever kind of diversion or targeting or radicalization, as they are referred to. Whatever went on did go on during some of that time, let's say part of that time, from October 2010 until February 2015. And at no time during those 6 calendar years, when Lutfur Rahman was in post as the so-called elected mayor in that corrupting post, Did Tower Hamlets Council, or indeed Newham Council, or Hackney Council next door, or Lewisham Council, these are the four councils that are lumbered with elected mayor post. In those 6 calendar years, none of those councils went on the record as saying that they could not protect the children because of lack of money, or they could not safeguard children exposed to serious threats of harm. None of them. So let them deny, let any of them deny that. So that's the challenge. That is, let's say, should be treated as the disclaimer, as the current, as the policy of our program. If we say anything that is factually not true or accurate, then we are welcoming anyone who should give us the facts. If what we are saying is not factually 100% accurate. If we are saying 100% accurate things, then we move on to demanding the Tower Hamlets Council publish the evidence of what they did to safeguard children in those 6 years. That is one part. That is one side. The other side is that what has the Tower Hamlets Council still being obliged to deliver safeguarding duties to safeguard children? What has the Tower Hamlets Council been doing since February 2015, when these children were first reported on mainstream media as having crossed into Syria? What has the Tower Hamlets Council been doing? Let them publish. And as far as the Home Office is concerned, do they recognize the Tower Hamlets Council was in any way answerable for its safeguarding duties towards the children? Does the Ministry of Housing, that is local government department or local council department, have any understanding that Tower Hamlets Council failed? If Tower Hamlets Council did fail, then what has the local government department been doing to hold Tower Hamlets Council to account? What has the local government, Ministry of Housing or whatever, has been doing since October 2010 until the 26th of February, when the Supreme Court published its stupid, corrupt judgment against Shamima Begum's rights as a child, as a British-born child. So any viewer who is aware of complex issues being aired and discussed must recognize that this program is bringing very serious, substantial issues of legal duties being failed and breached and denied, and other duties, and about racism, factual, robust, rigorous, factual, evidence-based information and questions. And so we continue to move on about Tower Hamlets Council being a council in denial generally. Say these 3 or 4 boys, Bangladeshi boys or Bangladeshi origin boys born in, let's say, UK and living somewhere in Shadwell, and standing on the Cable Street, on the side of the Cable Street, at a spot not far from the bus stop, the westbound bus stop on the D3 route that stops just before the primary school, the Bluegate Primary School or Bluegate Fields Primary School. Those 3 or 4 boys standing there, and they were teenage boys, Bangladeshi boys, standing there and throwing eggs at Bangladeshi persons walking past. Think about that. Why would they throw eggs at anyone, whatever their ethnic origin? And then one of the men that they had thrown eggs at went to ask them why they were doing that. These Bangladeshi boys or Bangladeshi origin boys, one of them said that they thought that this man was a Pakistani. I mean, quite why they thought that was one thing, but even if the person was Pakistani or Indian or from another background, why would they think that it was okay for them to attack that person with eggs or anything, or have any issue with the person passing by? That is, in a nutshell, one example out of literally hundreds that take place every kind of month in Tower Hamlets. Now, these are criminally active Bangladeshi children, criminally active. Okay, they are not active in the way that could be described as kind of radicalized terrorist or whatever, but they were doing criminal acts. And they could have really caused serious damage to the person or persons they were throwing the eggs at. Why were they doing that? And who in Tower Hamlets Council was responsible for their behavior, these children's behavior? Number one. Number two, who in Tower Hamlets Council thought that any kind of criminal activities by, let's generally call underage children in Tower Hamlets on all kinds of estates and all kinds of parts, that it was okay? And number three, did anyone in the council think that these children were destroying their own future, or at least most of the children behaving in that way were not doing any favors to their own future? So these are the kinds of questions that we are putting as part of the campaign for justice for Shamima Begum, and this is the evidence. We are not naming the children, and we are not giving any particular details that could identify them in public. But they are not the only ones doing this. They are only numerically a sample of other children doing the same kind of thing. Remember the migrants? Remember the children drowning in the channel, English channel, French channel, whatever, while trying to cross into England for a better life, out of starvation, out of famine, out of genocide and massacres back in their countries of origins in the two continents, Africa and Asia. Compare those children drowning in the channel with these children in Shadwell, Bangladeshi-born children, throwing what they thought was eggs, but that this could hit people with devastating consequences, injuries. And the distress was undeniable. So who told them to do that? And what mindset was it that allowed them to do that at the time or similar, along the same time when children of their age were dying in the English Channel in their bid to come for a better future? Is that the kind of future that they were coming to? Would they be allowed to behave in that way? And why was none of these three or four children even aware of any responsibility? They might be underage, but they were not. They were not imbeciles, and they were not incapable of basic rational conversation and concepts. Who allowed them to be in that mindset, in that position? What did the schools do? What did the councils do? And what did their parents do? And what did the so-called community leaders do? And what were they ever bothered about this? And did they know what Bangladeshi children were doing to other Bangladeshi people, including Bangladeshi adults? And this, again, as I said, this particular incident was taking place in the Cable Street in Shadwell. But similar, not necessarily the exact details, but similar criminal behavior by Bangladeshi teenagers against Bangladeshi adults were taking place right across the border. And they are now. Okay, because of the lockdown, the numbers of incidents may be different, but similar things are happening. Things that are criminal, things that are violent, and things that are harmful. And who gave them the kind of idea that they could do that and get away with this? That they do that and it could not have any consequence on other people or on themselves. Now, if that is the atmosphere of Tower Hamlets Council, then it is evidentially safe to observe that the council was not being operated to look out for that kind of behavior and to address the behavior. It follows logically that anything that went on, not in the public sense of these Bangladeshi teenagers throwing eggs at passers-by who are Bangladeshi as well, but passers-by that were being attacked also on the assumption that they might be of Indian or Pakistani origin. I mean, why would that make any difference? Why would a Pakistani or an Indian be considered as warranting attacks by Bangladeshis? Where did that come from? And what has happened is that in the few elections, let's say the first election to Tower Hamlets Council of the largest number of Bangladeshi candidates of the Labour Party was in 1990. In May 1990, so let's count, 94, 98, and 2002, 2006, and 2010, 2014, and 2018. So there has been 28 years, let's say, since the largest number of Bangladeshi candidates stood for election and got elected to Tower Hamlets Council. So 7 elections. Out of the 7 elections, of course, there have been some constant, but most of the candidates that got elected in 1990 are no longer on the council, let's say. But what can be checked is what they said, and what they moved and what they left out. Who can account for their kind of time as elected councillor on Tower Hamlets Council? Who will be prepared to publish, make available in public their actions, their policies, their campaigns within the council? That is a question I'm putting here, and I'm putting this as part of the campaign for justice for this Shamima Begum and her friends, but other children as well. And this is the thing that I have said before. Nobody else has said that. I'm saying it and I have said it, and this is the best way, evidentially, to proceed to establish who said what and who did what as a councillor or townless council. And I'm talking about the combined context as a Labour Party member, as a Bangladeshi member, and most of the Bangladeshis, with very small exceptions, have been put members of the Muslim community. And Muslim is important because Muslims are considered to be the radicals or the people whose community has radicals in them. So which councillor or which elected councillors since May 1990 actually sought the information about who was getting derailed, who was getting misled, who was getting involved in radicalism or similar. I'm not saying radicalism as such, but similar. Anything that is harmful, anything that is illegal, that is anything that is broadly antisocial and corrupt and criminal, as objectively defined, as defined in the accepted law of the land, if you like. So which councillor or councillors have done that job and defend the values that I am advocating and I've been advocating in whatever capacity they have been doing it, how they have been doing it, and what independent means of proof is available, or can they cite, or can they mention to prove that they actually did what they are claiming to have done. So I give another example. When I organized the campaign, let's say between 1993 and 95, I have been doing multiple campaigns at once and at the same time. When I organized the campaign at the school in E14 in Manchester Road, following an approach to me by groups of parents or guardians in the E14 area in the Manchester Road, after a Bangladeshi boy in that secondary school was nearly beaten to death by white children. Nearly beaten to death. So I was kind of contacted as an emergency. This is how I have been working. I go like the fireman, going to put out the fire and start the campaign, which is what I did on that school. And I have never received any funding. And I have not been funded. If anyone contributed anything, it would be like to do the communication at the time or part of it, or transport like cabs and whatever. And I say that emphatically. I have not been funded and no one could fund me because the work I do cannot be funded without huge sums of money and resources. And because of that, I know the community's limitations. So I make myself available and I have been funding all of that with my own resources and abilities and skills. And so that school had the head teacher who refused to protect the safety of the children. Remember safeguarding? And we're talking a long time before, these children were even kind of out of or into primary school. It is maybe they were 2 years old or 3 years old. Shamima would have been 2 or 3 years old at the time in 93, 94. So I went to the place, including visiting several flats in the Samuda estate or Samuda Road not far from the Mulberry School on the other side of the Blackwall Tunnel. And I had months of kind of meetings and engagements, and including the demonstration I organized outside the Department for Education, and we went there in a number of vehicles from that area. And it was absolutely successful because what happened after that had happened more than 10 years ago when I organized similar campaign in the Stepney Green School after a child called Maruf was very badly knifed by a racist. And we completely changed the composition of the Stepney Green School by organizing the campaign that I did in 1981-82. So this school in E14 in Manchester Road, in the campaign that we organized, there was no input. Remember, that was the time within the first year, or the first term of the election of 1990. Not a single Tower Hamlets councillor was involved. Remember what we are talking about. What did the Tower Hamlets councillors do for safeguarding children? About Shamima Begum, but we are going historically, totally factually, based on the facts that I created the campaign and I organized the campaign. And what happened was that parents were there, guardians were there, and there was me. And I put a demand, a list of demands to the Department for Education, so-called. And the head teacher was eventually out. He left. And from that moment onwards, that school, its composition, its kind of population began to change. And it was no longer a white majority school that could then harass and bully the Bangladeshi children. That is the immediate result. And that school is different now and has been since 1993-94 when I did the campaign. Why am I saying this? Because I contacted a number of the councillors, including the then still active thing called the City Challenge, Spitalfield City Challenge, which had, by the arrangement of bureaucracy, a place for local councillor to be the head of the committee. So on that basis, I asked a number of questions as to what they were doing or what they would do to help the campaign that I was involved in. No reply. Those were faxes. And literally dozens of faxes were sent. No reply, no engagement, no acknowledgement. I'm asserting this. Anyone like to deny that? They cannot deny it because they cannot substantiate that. Even the faxes can be investigated and fact-checked and retrieved. And in none of those faxes did I have any interest personally to benefit or to promote my career. But while they didn't even acknowledge any of the faxes, they were funding a number of crooks in the Spitalfield area that have become enhanced by the funding given to them under the banner of the Spitalfield City Challenge, but not to the longer lasting values of my campaign and the protection of children like Shamima Begum. So I'm just giving some very real examples, evidence, data, minutes. Let us have the minutes of what you were doing in those days. And anything else that these people have been doing, these people who were councillors at that time and have been doing since they ceased to be councillors, let us have written and demonstrable and verified and verifiable evidence of what they have been doing to safeguard the children, to protect the future of the children and the community, and to protect the reputation of the Bangladeshi community in the UK. Because although we are Bangladeshi origin. We are not part of the Bangladeshi political kind of operations whatsoever. At least none of the activities of the campaigns that I do and have done and will do will have anything to do with any party politics or anything to do with an agenda in Bangladesh. That is bad, that is diversionary, and that is corrupt, and that is dishonest, and that is absolutely hostile to the future safety and security and settlement of the people that are, for historical reason, called UK Bangladeshis, but we are not part of anything to do with Bangladesh politically or group-wise or whatever. We shouldn't be. That is my view, and that is the view objectively arrived at. And for example, if those people at the Spitalfields City Challenge at the time had any respect, any regard, any kind of care for other people in the community, not necessarily in the future, like 25 years later, like Shamima Begum and others, but even at the contemporary time, people that were existing and living in the community at that time, even if they had any respect, they would have acknowledged receipt and they would have engaged in issues and discussions, so that the public funds that were available, made available through the Spitalfields City Challenge, could have been put to the best use for the good of the widest numbers of people in the community, and that would have been a good and correct investment in the future, but it wasn't. And what happened in the Spitalfields City Challenge had been happening some years earlier. Let's say City Challenge was operating, say, in the early 1990s, let's say, especially after the 1991, and after Michael Heseltine or Heseltine or Heza came into office as the Secretary of State, who introduced this City Challenge model, which was a corrupt model from the beginning. And I shall go into that again in this part again. What happened was that the 1991 uprisings that prompted Heseltine to introduce this City Challenge model in some cities in the northeast of England, northwest of England, in the Midlands, and in London, of course, was that this was based on the racist, shabby kind of sociological opinion that as the youths in upheaval were mainly of Caribbean origin or of African origin through the Caribbean, and of Asian origin, mainly in the Midlands and in the northern boroughs, that they would be kind of open to being bought off, and a lot of funding channeled through the City Challenge route given to groups that were servile to the government and completely dishonestly kind of formed in response to the possibility of money being available, that the uprisings would end. Now, this was one of the racist, stupid kind of ideas. And the City Challenge model was a vehicle for corruption and bribery and buying off some of the most corrupt individuals in the communities, all the communities affected. And this is what happened. The City Challenge money, the records can be found as to how much money was actually spent, public money, central government money was spent in the whole project, under whole program. This was a bribery money. This was against the idea of objective education. This was against the idea of democracy. This was against the idea of accountability. And what it did was it gave undue access to crooks in the local communities to occupy decision-making positions in those city challenge bodies. And because they had the kind of license, if you like, given by the government, linked to the fact that they were members of the boards or whatever, they could, any group of crazy, irresponsible, jealous, zidua, as we say in Siloti, person being given that access would be able to escape all accountability democratically to the local community and show two fingers to those that they knew would not have the immediate legal kind of power to stop them, the crooks, that is. That is exactly what happened. And this was going to happen anytime, every time that ethnicity was used. That ethnicity was used to dish out money, public money. Because the ethnicity may be used superficially, like externally, like saying this or that is a Bangladeshi origin or Indian origin community or area. But within that community, there exists no platform that is objectively, fairly accessible to all the members of the community. And the same thing happened in Tower Hamlets, in the Bangladeshi community, especially in Brick Lane, in the kind of Spitalfields areas, Spitalfield, Bethnal Green, whatever. And there was no platform independently existing and operating because there was no resource, there was no funding. And so therefore no one from another functioning body could assert the democratic say on behalf of the community to the Spitalfields City Challenge and demand accountability for the allocation of funding that the City Challenge was making. So once the money went, the money went. And you cannot recover the money because there is no actual avenue available through the court system that allows access for justice and adjudication for these kind of decisions, because it would be an issue of practicality. How much public resource can be given to adjudicate on decisions that are now passed and worthless to review because they cannot be gone through again? It would be duplication for nothing. Like happened in the Tower Hamlets Council. And coming to the findings of the audit that Eric Pickles ordered into the behavior of Tower Hamlets Council while Luther Roman was imposed as elected mayor. And one of the projects or one of the kind of sales that has featured as representative of the corruption of Luther Roman regime was about the old town hall. And without going into too much details because of time, the town hall, the popular town hall, the old popular town hall was a substantial building in technical terms, in physical terms. But it was abused and it was sold at extraordinarily unreal low kind of rate. And this was part of a corrupt scam. Now, who the actual crooks were have not been identified in any prosecution because no prosecution has taken place. But there is ample evidence that similar corrupt kind of scams were operated by Luther Roman, including the building that was for quite a number of years a bank building in the Whitechapel Road, not far from the former royal kind of post office in the Virtual Road. And that building, like the old popular town hall, of course, it was smaller than the town hall, but it had, or it still has, solid structures and foundation. So it was worth much more than it was so-called sold for. And it has been illustrated as one of the representative examples of the corruption involving property during Luthvaraman's time. And so what we are saying here is that a council which is involved in brazen criminality and corruption and dishonesty, how can the same council be expected to be concerned about the safeguarding of children like Shamima Begum? That is the point of referring to all of this in this particular kind of part, because they are not the decision makers in the council, either Luthvaraman as the mayor or John Biggs as the mayor, elected mayor so-called. None of them is kind of seen to be under rigorous demands and questioning from anywhere in the community, anywhere in the council. And as I have been saying, to this day, which is the 11th of March, 2021, which is what, 11th of month, 13 days, 2 weeks since the corrupt ruling against Shamima Begum issued by the so-called Supreme Court. And in the 2 weeks, there have been lots of so-called issues and topics that have been featuring in the so-called ethnicity-linked media in the borough of Tower Hamlets. But the points that we have been making have not been actually made by any platform. They have been referring to Shamima Begum, of course, but they have not been questioning anything of the council. They have been lame in putting references like, did Tower Hamlets Council do this, do that? This is a lame and incomplete imitation of our original rigorous campaign demands. Think about that. When the 2010, the May 2010 so-called general election took place in the UK, and Roshanara Ali got in, the first thing that the ethnicity-linked so-called outlets did was to hold a reception for her somewhere in the next borough, not in Tower Hamlets, but in Newham. And the reception was allegedly organized by a thing called London Bangla Press Club. That is a stupid and corrupt name. It's not a union, it's a club, remember? And when they say London Bangla, they don't mean Bangla. They don't Sylheti speakers posing as Bangla speakers and doing all kinds of ingratiations for all kinds of criminal and malified sources, including agencies in Bangladesh or from Bangladesh. And Rushnara Ali was feted as some kind of big achievement. I mean, she became an MP. It's not an achievement. It's a reflection of the presence of the people among the electorate who constitute Bangladeshis, and that is all she did. She did, and others on her behalf did, kind of tell the people to vote for her because she's of the same background. That's all. There was no evidence that Rushnar Ali was going to deliver anything by being an MP for the community. She hasn't. And the fact that she hasn't doesn't need to be looked for in a deep, mysterious kind of hay or sack of haze or collection of haze. She has not done anything about the dozens of issues involved in the whole series of activities that Shamima Begum and her friends have been through. And Rushna Ali hasn't done anything about this duties of the schools, duties of the council, duties of the government towards the community, towards the people affected by this. Not against poverty, not against homelessness, not against corruption and criminality. In fact, Rushna Ali, as one of the two MPs from the borough of Tower Hamlets, or one of the two MPs from one of the two constituencies in Tower Hamlets, has been part and parcel of collusion with crooks of the Tower Hamlets community housing. And her criminal collusion with those crooks has been made known to the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets, which has said that whatever she did or didn't do was not the responsibility of the Tower Hamlets Labour Party, but Parliament or whatever. Parliament cannot do anything except to waste time. Rushna Ali has shown the narrative, the agenda, the purpose, and her affiliation. And those are contrary to the majority of the needs that exist in the community among the people in the electorate. Her collusion, complicity with the Tower Hamlets community housing took place, let's say, in September 2011. And this has been the subject of literally dozens of communications which have recorded what she did and her role. So it can be all the dates and all the incidents, the main incidents of Rushna Ali's collusion and complicity with the crooks and the liars and the racists, especially the racist Mike Tyrrell, in the Tower Hamlets community housing can be published if she denies any of it. And I invite Rushna Ali to go on the record, adequately on the record, to deny any of the allegations that exist and are standing against her. So if Rushna Ali was already engaged in collusion and complicity with the Tower Hamlets community housing, that by extension, it follows that she would have been doing similar things about other issues. And she has. She has not, for example, said any of the things that are known to be wrong as Tower Hamlets Council's decisions and conduct. She has not raised any concern about that at all. The only time Rushna Ali has come along and gone on the record with reference to anything to do with Tower Hamlets Council has been two occasions that I can remember sitting here. If she can give other lists of her full range of activities, we shall then choose and show that she has been doing the other things wrongly as well. So the two occasions when Rushna Ali has come forward and mentioned Tower Hamlets Council have been one about Lutfur Rahman or Lutfur Rahman's kind of regime condemning John Biggs for racist kind of statement that Biggs made in September 2013, I think 22nd of September 2013, about the Lutfur Rahman regime. This is an untruthful assertion that Krishna Ali made, John Biggs made, and Lutheraman supported John Biggs on that. Because what Biggs said was that Lutheraman was thinking of the Bangladeshis on the western side of the Bara and making decisions that were beneficial to the Bangladeshis. And he was not treating the rest of the population equally. Now, Lutheraman wasn't doing that at all. What Lutheraman was doing was he was targeting persons for votes. And he was kind of applying the advantage that people would get. And those people would get the advantage based on their willingness, as he perceived, to vote for him. Remember, that was the year before the 2014 mayor election. So if the voters in the, let's say, western part of the Bara were predominantly likely to vote for Lutheraman, then his kind of preference for them was not motivated by their ethnicity, but it was motivated by their willingness to vote for him. Now, I know that it's a difficult distinction to make, but that is the truth. The reason is that Lutheraman caused serious, severe harm and damages to the Bangladeshi community overall. That's why I'm saying that he was never doing anything for the Bangladeshis. He was doing most of the things that were harming Bangladeshis, but he was doing some things that were coincidentally benefiting voters that would vote for him and who happened to be Bangladeshis. It's not the other way around. So that line that John Biggs promoted was backed by Rushna Ali. And another time when John Biggs as a racist was identified, Rushna Ali again took the side of John Biggs. And she mocked anyone using concern for racism, concern against racism, as a valid reason for attacking a racist. That is the paraphrase, that is not the exact words. So what I'm saying is that Rushna Ali, she is in post as an MP. But that's by default. Because there is not a credible opposition to her in terms of election, in terms of the votes. She thinks she is there guaranteed for life. And that is the truth. And while she was doing the siding with John Biggs, the other MP at that time, 2013, was, of course, Jean Fitzpatrick. Now, Fitzpatrick supports John Biggs anytime and every time that when the issue of race comes up. Fitzpatrick, Michael Crook, John Biggs, these are among the three racists in Tower Hamlets politics, so-called, who have taken a hostile stand every time on issues of race and racial justice or justice against racism. So given that, it is absolutely impossible to imagine that Tower Hamlets Council would have come under any kind of pressure from Rushna Ali or Jean Fitzpatrick to protect and safeguard the children like Shamima Begum. Think about the various evidence that I put together and presented here. We shall be continuing But think about the evidence. Think about the invitation to anyone who thinks that the summary and the actual incidents that I have mentioned are inaccurate in any way or kind of biased in any way to suit our agenda. We haven't got any agenda except to tell the truth objectively.